Well, 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 well. Well, well, well! I'm so excited to make this video today that I didn't even bother putting a hat on. That's how I had to free myself. Today's video is about one of the biggest changes that PvP has ever seen. We are seeing a massive audit, but this time, instead of regular spells, they're finally auditing TCs. Without further ado, here's a review of every treasure card that was changed in this update that happened last night. I think we should start with the dumbest damn card that they've ever made in the game, and I don't know why it's been in the game for 10 years, and why it has taken this long for them to follow up a regular spell audit with a TC audit. I think we should start with this garbage. The amount of pain that this card has caused me. So the first big change that you might notice is that if you had any minus 90 Ifrit TCs, they've been changed to 45s. That's right. For no longer can people just put a bunch of 90 TCs in their TC deck and rock 3-row decks and just pull it at leisure. The TC Ifrit is officially dead. I think the best part about the fact that the TC Ifrit audit happened is that it actually acted very uniformly. So it's not just fire Ifrit, it's every minus 90 weakness. So if you have a minus 90 weakness card, if you have like a balance Ifrit, if you have a life Ifrit, these are all no PvP. What this means is that no longer, in a TC form anyways, will you be able to use a card like this and completely shut out your opponent from winning the game using a minus 90 weakness. This is just a huge, it's just going to be better for PvP in general. More strategy. Now, the only thing is, if you do have a Vengeful Ifrit pet, if you happen to have one like that, it does still exist. You technically can still have one copy of a minus 90. I still honestly think the 90 weaknesses are still broken, and if every school is getting them removed, I genuinely do think that this should be a part of it as well. However, I can see why they might have, stopped the TCs, because here's the thing. At least by making a pet like this, you're giving up stats. Like, you're giving up gear sets that you could be getting, especially when there are pets like, like the Scaly Frillosaur. If you have access to this, you have access to an 8 damage gear set. So, yes, Ifrits are still technically in the game, but really, functionally, they're not. Basically, what I'm trying to say is there's going to be more strategy compared to last night, and that's something we could all love and appreciate, in my opinion. Let's move on to the next audited TC. Oh! Yeah! In reviewing the second TC audit, I must say that this was a good choice. I think that when it comes to ice, I have no idea. This is such a no-brainer to me. I feel like if Fire Beetle were to be made no PvP, then this should have followed immediately. Anything that hits for such low pips, for so much damage, and gives such an offensive blade, it simply doesn't belong on a school like Ice. It's supposed to be a defensive school. I think it's a no-brainer. I can't wait to never see this in PvP ever again. Again, people can make the pet card if they want, but in the case of Iceberg specifically, this is the big change that everyone needed. Now, I like this for multiple reasons. One, it actually makes some matchups a lot easier that Ice actually might need to struggle against finally. For one, I can think of Storm. I feel like Iceberg is such an easy Scion counter because you can literally break a shield and get a blade. So you can theoretically, as long as you keep a shield on, you could always use this and be ahead in tempo. The other thing that I'm very excited about is that minion killing with Icebergs is not going to be as easy. That means that if you blade stack like crazy on an ice, a good punishment will now actually beat a minion. Now before, it used to not be a good move because they would just kill the minion and get a blade to replace it. So as long as they had bubble control, you're looking at 2 buffs at all times because of just this one spell. So Storm will be a little bit better against Ice, and minions are going to be much better against Ice. If you can waste out their wanteds, the second they blade, a minion's always going to be a good move. The other insane audit, which I'm actually so happy that they actually did this, is that they got rid of frozen bats as well, which means there's no way to go around it. Like a hit and buff is simply just not available to Ice anymore. I think it makes sense. I genuinely do. I think if you want school identity, it makes sense that Ice has something that hits and shields. makes a lot of sense that Ice has something like this. It makes much less sense why it should have a hit and buff. The other thing that also got audited is Ice Elf. So now there's another reason why Ice won't be able to use as much offense as before. I don't think Ice Elf is a huge change to PvP. The good thing about getting rid of Ice Elf, in my opinion, is that you just don't have access to very easy minion killers. And you also don't just, you won't see Ice Wizards anymore just bracing into an Ice Elf and then spamming a bomb. If you are going to overtime, now the easiest way to do it is with a Polar Swarm, or obviously you could always just Frostbite. The other one, there's 4. It's Christmas. Ice actually got a nerf. Arcticzilla also seemed to have gotten the no PvP. It seems like every version of it. So I have 2 different versions. Both of them aren't able to be used in PvP. Again, this one's a huge no-brainer to me. Yeah, I used to rock this pet because it gave Arcticzilla cards. Honestly, if you really want to, you could still use this pet, and you just have a fewer copies of it. The reason why I use this is because compared to a Climaclysm, you're looking at a card without the Shadow Pip that just does that amount. Especially for 4 pips. Like, in an age where enchants are, like, you know, like, they are limited, right? You can only use so many Solar Surges. In an update like that, a card like this is so insane for Ice. It's actually, it's just the damage per pip. It makes it an insanely powerful card. This doesn't make Ice bad at PvP whatsoever, in my opinion. All it does is rein in some of their I guess their over ability to buy tempo. They won't be able to, like, you know, do too much damage too quickly with Arcticzilla, and they won't be able to buy too many free rounds with spells like Ice Elf, Ice Bird, and Frozen Bats. So far, we've seen meaningful nerfs to Ice, we've seen a meaningful nerf to Fire, and we've also technically seen a meaningful nerf to Balance and Life if they happen to have Efreet TCs that other people don't have access to. But that is not all. Other schools are also getting buffed. Schools that use overtimes are finally going to be able to use overtimes without getting the damage shifted back onto them. Now, here's the first thing that I think they did mess up a little bit. It seems like some versions of the shift are no PvP, but other versions are not. I'm sure what this is going to mean is that some people are just going to use this for the next 5 months until this is fixed. Now, I'm being sarcastic, obviously. I mean, I would assume that if they were able to change this, they're probably going to change this as well to no PvP. Again, in my opinion, it's a huge no-brainer. This is a TC that, again, it makes no sense because Myth has a 4-pip version of the spell as a learnable spell, and then the TC version's 1 pip less. So it reduces school identity by making one of Myth's tools less important to it, but also it just makes every other school more able to use it because it's 3 pips instead of 4. I think when it comes to utilities like this, I'm always a bigger fan of removing the ease at which you can do it rather than just removing it straight up. I've always thought that if the Myth version is 4 pips, the TC version should be 5 pips. And to be honest, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think a spell that can literally push all the damage that you worked up to, it shouldn't be this easy to get. So, I mean, maybe this is a temporary fix until a bigger spell audit. All this means is if you blade up into a Frostbite, or you blade up into a Poison, or if you use Burning Rampage, the thing that you really have to fear now, it's triage. So yes, the overtime can still be removed, but the damage isn't going to be brought over to you. So again, I don't think there's a huge change to overtime simply because triage still exists. But again, this just adds more strategy to the game in my opinion. It removes a relatively cheesy way to win. If you just wait for someone to blade up like crazy and then do an overtime, and then you just shift it over, in my opinion, that's a relatively cheesy way to win. Again, this might be a matter of opinion. I'm pretty mixed on shift in general, because it's purely utility. I think spells like this, in my opinion, should always be tempered with pip-wise, but I feel like that's a harder change to do than just, you know, for now, maybe putting them out of the queue. Now for what I think is the most controversial change. I think this is a very, very big deal, and that's that spells that remove all blades are no longer PvP. That's Enfeeble, and of course, Aftershock. Now, this right here, in my opinion, is the one that this is the one that I'm most concerned about, not because it's a bad change, but because I wonder how the meta is going to respond to it. It's worth noting that Shatter did not get the same treatment as Enfeeble or Aftershock. Now, here's the thing. Shatter is not the same spell as Enfeeble or Aftershock. I also think it's much, much easier to enfeeble somebody than it is to like shatter and then get a good hit, right? Enfeeble is basically, it is more powerful. The problem with it is that it doesn't respond to how many blades you're removing. It's 2 pips no matter what. And also has the same problem as a 3-pip shift. Storm has a 3-pip enfeeble, but then the TC's 2 pips. It just doesn't make any sense. So now, if someone's gonna blade up several times, the schools that are going to be naturally very good against it are now finally Storm and Myth, as you would want. Now, Aftershock, I think, was a little less broken, but also, you could still use the same argument, right? It's removing every blade for 4 pips, no matter how you look at it. If someone spends 30 rounds blading, for the sake of an example, in the 1 round that you Aftershock, you can remove every single blade. There is a good news and a bad news for people who are using spells like Enfeeble and Aftershock. You can always technically Earthquake. Now, here's the thing. I don't really like the argument of you can always use Earthquake because this is 6 pips. And if you're not Myth, then it's 12 pips with power pips included. I have a feeling what might be necessary is people are probably going to have to carry Empowers so that they can make up for the rounds that they have to wait. And Empowers are great because they're new pips anyways. It's just for the sake of being able to Aftershock, or sorry, Earthquake instead of Aftershock, or Earthquake instead of Enfeeble. I think Empowers are going to be much more useful. Maybe pack a couple of Empowers and a couple of Earthquakes, you know, so you can always remove every blade if it gets to the point where it's crazy. My main concern, I mean, I think you guys can tell that I actually really think the changes are very positive. My main concern is Shatter. I'm very, very concerned about this. Not because, like, this was the objectively bad way to go about it. It's just there's no way to tell if Shatter is just as broken as Enfeeble when Enfeeble doesn't exist. You could always Aegis your shields and Myth Dispel a Shatter, but if somebody really wanted to, I think they could literally just blade up several times and then Shatter twice. And no Aegis can really do anything about that. And what that kind of forces your opponent to do, especially if you're blading up a lot, is just to kill you fast. The 2 schools I'm worried about when it comes to Shatter being in the game are the schools that play, in my opinion, the most defensively, which are Ice, Life, and honestly, we can throw in Death, honestly, right? I mean, these schools really don't have any really good counter to blade stacking naturally, so I'm wondering if someone just blade stacks like crazy and then just shatters a couple of times, is there any counter? Because I don't think you can really argue that they can kill you fast enough to keep up with that. So my only hope is that because Enfeeble and Aftershock were removed, I do hope that Shatter is at least they're open to changing Shatter. Again, this is something that we'll genuinely just have to see. It could be that the tempo is biased enough towards defensive schools as it is, which it seems to be at the moment, that Shatter is actually a good thing to have, whereas Enfeeble wasn't. Several blades can be countered by a couple of shields, and that's always why Enfeeble would be more broken than Shatter. So maybe we'll see. Again, I'm just kind of spitballing here. I do question keeping Enfeeble no PvP, but also not touching Shatter. I do question that a little bit, but that's just my personal opinion. But yeah, guys, overall, I definitely think there'll be more diversity in PvP for strategies. There's going to be less TC reliance, which is always good for people who are entering PvP for the first time. And there might be a really nice shift into overtimes and blade stacking, which helps schools that are currently struggling, like Death. As a converse, we might get strategies that are very simplistic, which just involve blading into the blade, into the blade, into the blade, into the Shatter, and winning off of that, and we'll see. Maybe there'll be new ways to counter that as well. So the meta's not going to change that much, other than the fact that I think Death gets a very meaningful buff, and I think Ice and Fire get a very, very meaningful debuff. So yeah, guys, that's my review of all the TCs, whether I agree with them, where I think they fall short, how it might affect the game. I hope you guys got something out of this video. Of course, these videos only work when I hear y'all's opinion, so let me know what your opinion is in the comments. Drop a comment. Also, drop a like if you enjoyed, leave a sub if you're new. There's tons of links in the description, including my Twitch, my Twitter, my Discord, my Instagram, and of course my Patreon. And as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. So stay awesome, and yeah.